Welcome back. Our high-tech, electronic, computerized right now world runs on electricity and computer chips. As we have seen in Texas recently, or even here in the Midwest late last summer, remove one and the whole economy can come to a screeching halt. Likewise, pretty much every aspect of mobility is tied to computer chips at some point. So, a shortage could turn things pretty serious pretty quickly. And yet, here we are. Let's start with your vehicle. Whether you know it or not, and you've heard us say this many times, what you own, particularly if you've bought a vehicle in the last 10 years, is essentially a rolling computer on wheels. Because you don't have just one or two computer chips, you have many. You have millions of lines of code that control everything from the verification of your remote starting key to the push button start of your vehicle. All of these things require various verification and confirmation in order for things to happen. And that takes computer power, and that requires a computer chip. Here's why it should matter to you. Now, first bombshell. And when you hear me say it, you go, well, duh, but you might not have realized. Companies like Apple Computer, Qualcomm, and those companies, they don't make computer chips. They design computer chips. Why is that important? Because there are two companies in the world that account for most of the computer chips that are made in the world.
Which is a disaster waiting to happen.
It just happened.
Yeah, which is happening.
And here's the bombshell. Neither one of those companies are in the United States of America.
Monopolization of companies in any way like that, whether it's even if it's in the United States, can be issues like the plastics we talked about last week in Texas. Or, when you have everything singled in one area, all it takes is that one area to drop off, and then all of a sudden we're screwed.
Well, here's the problem. Combine the pandemic, combine recent cold snaps, combine everything, and we had an abrupt and cascading global shortage of semiconductors, which was started actually last year because of COVID-19, because of protocols, because of changing requirements. As people went home, they started buying electronic gear. That overwhelmed the companies and the demand. Meanwhile, because people weren't buying cars, at least initially, the automakers throttled back. And there's still lingering problems. Pretty much every automaker over the last 6 months has had to close a plant for a period of time because a shortage of computer chips. It's hard to believe that it's either your truck or your Game Boy, or your PlayStation, but that's where we are now. Two companies, both Asian, and of all places, no people, it's not China, it's Taiwan. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company and Samsung Electronics Company. These two companies control the majority of the computer chips made. There are other companies, but let me put it to you this way. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing is bigger than the next 10 combined. Let that settle for a minute.
But China's also pushing hard to catch up, like they said, which is an important point.
It is, but they're still 2 to 3 generations away. America's looking at it. But here's the thing. You're going, well, why isn't this in America, and why can't we do it? Well, folks, let's talk some basic truth here. Making computer chips is a very precise, difficult, labor-intensive, water-intensive, electricity-intensive process. You don't get room to screw it up. And there are very few people on the planet that can do it. To give you an example of just how much money is involved, over the next year, just Taiwan Semiconductor, 1 year, they're going to spend $28 billion. Remember, they're already the leader. Samsung is looking at the next 5 years of spending over $112 billion to try to catch up. These are not pennies. Plus, there's this issue of what they call yield on these chips. In order to be successful, you have to have a yield when you're making these silicon chips for computer chips of 90%. These companies are there, but it's taken experience, years, and their know-how to do it. You don't just throw money at the problem and think you're going to get there.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's a very specialized, unique, very specific skill set. And it's not one or two people. You need a bunch of people who have it and know what to do. And they are very hard to come by.
I still feel like it's partially an excuse, though. There's a lot of other things we do that in other industries with medicine and saline. Like 90% of our saline for the IV bags came from a foreign country that got hit by a storm, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're struggling in Puerto Rico or something like that.
But what you're looking at, Chase, is the fact that it's called vertical integration. And when you're getting into capital expenditures of all the items, vertical integration makes sense, but it also consolidates. Look at the auto industry. Just for an example, there were hundreds of companies 100 years ago. Even now, that pool is still shrinking because it's a very capital intensive business. Not everybody can do it. Look how long it took Elon Musk to make EVs cool, and he almost didn't make it. You know, it was a thin line there for him.
But it looks like this administration is trying to incentivize companies to push forward with this to make sure we don't have another gap in the supply chain.
They're looking at all sorts of things, not just computer
absolutely.
chips, but they're looking at everything.
It's crazy.
But here's the problem. Will American consumers pay for that protection? Because somebody's got to pay for it. And at the end of the day, it means that if you're gonna deleverage or decentralize an industry, you're going to pay for the inefficiencies that smaller producers have. And the question is it worth to have more control but maybe a higher price because they're not pumping out 10 million computer chips a month?
What's the alternative? We can't have a shortage like this.
Yeah, but here's the problem. We got this way because the market said, no, we will award our business to the most efficient producer globally, period. And until we have a different mindset of what that means and the fact that you're going to have to pay more in order to have to mitigate this kind of stuff, you're going to have more of it.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's why you only have a handful of automakers making vehicles in America anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's cost intensive. Why all other industries, the phone industry, the steel industry, pick one, they've all consolidated over the years because the cost of capital and the cost of talent and the need to get economies of scale to make these big investments pay off. That's not government trust issues. That's just pure economics. These plants, even run by the two biggest ones, have to run 24/7 and get a 90% yield and not lose a thing. It takes a lot of money to do it right each and every time. Like I said, Taiwan Semiconductor makes 10 million chips a month. And, you know, they're looking at other places to do a plant, a Chinese plant. They expect to be up and only make 40,000 a month.